And Americans now have less than 2 months to make their final decision. Let's get right to last night's high-stakes ABC News debate.
With just 55 days until the final votes in a race that is in a dead heat, Kamala Harris faced off against Donald Trump. It was the first time the two have ever met in person. The night began with the vice president walking across the stage to shake the former president's hand.
Harris clearly signaling there that she wanted to take command, kicking off 90 minutes of confrontation. Former President Trump on defense for most of the night. In the first debate, polls say that voters think Harris won. Our team is live in Philadelphia this morning. Chief White House correspondent Mary Bruce starts us off. Good morning, Mary.
Good morning, George. Well, this was a fierce and fiery face-off. Donald Trump on the defensive for much of the night. Kamala Harris taking every chance she could to get under his skin, goading Trump to go off message while avoiding much focus on her own vulnerabilities. The policy often overshadowed by these personal attacks. But this morning, the big question remains, will any of this be enough to fundamentally change the dynamics of this race? It started with what appeared to be a moment of civility, a historic handshake initiated by the vice president, the rivals meeting for the very first time.
Kamala Harris, let's have a good debate.
Nice to see you. Have fun.
Thank you.
But the niceties didn't last. The nominees quickly digging into each other, beginning with the issue top of mind for many voters, the economy.
Donald Trump actually has no plan for you because he is more interested in defending himself than he is in looking out for you.
She doesn't have a plan. She copied Biden's plan, and it's like 4 sentences, like run, spot, run. 4 sentences that are just, oh, we'll try and lower taxes.
The vice president repeatedly goading Donald Trump, trying to get under his skin.
And what you will also notice is that people start leaving his rallies early out of exhaustion and boredom.
The former president taking the bait.
She said people start leaving. People don't go to her rallies. There's no reason to go.
But Trump throwing the heat right back at her.
Wait a minute. I'm talking now. If you don't mind, please. Does that sound familiar? She went out.
One of the most contentious exchanges of the night on abortion. Harris trying to capitalize on Democrats' advantage on the issue.
One does not have to abandon their faith or deeply held beliefs to agree. The government, and Donald Trump certainly, should not be telling a woman what to do with her body. I have talked with women around our country. You want to talk about this is what people wanted? Pregnant women who want to carry a pregnancy to term, suffering from a miscarriage, being denied care in an emergency room because the healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in a car in the parking lot. She didn't want that.
But she also dodged when asked if she would support any abortion restrictions, while Trump repeated false claims, prompting a fact check from moderator Lindsay Davis.
There is no state in this country where it is legal to kill a baby after it's born.
And he refused to rule out signing a national abortion ban. On immigration, Trump trying to pin previous chaos at the border on Harris.
They're destroying the fabric of our country by what they've done.
Harris laying into Trump for urging Republicans to kill the bipartisan border deal.
But what we have in the former president is someone who would prefer to run on a problem instead of fixing a problem. And I'll tell you something, he's going to talk about immigration a lot tonight, even when it's not the subject that is being raised.
Trump responding by repeating a false conspiracy theory about migrants eating people's pets in Springfield, Ohio.
I just want to clarify here, you bring up Springfield, Ohio, and ABC News did reach out to the city manager there. He told us there have been no credible reports of specific claims of pets being harmed, injured, or abused by individuals within the immigrant community.
Well, I've seen people on television.
Let me just say here, this is the
people on television say my dog was taken and used for food. So maybe he said that, and maybe that's a good thing to say for a city manager.
I'm not taking this from television.
But the people on television saying their dog was eaten by the people that went there.
Again, the Springfield city manager says there's no evidence of that. Vice President Harris, I'll let you respond to the rest of what you've heard.
You talk about extreme.
The candidates also sparring on foreign policy.
It is absolutely well known that these dictators and autocrats are rooting for you to be president again because they're so clear they can manipulate you with flattery and favors.
The leaders of other countries think that they're weak and incompetent, and they are. They're grossly incompetent.
And getting personal, Trump asked about his statements questioning Harris's racial identity.
So I'm asking,
I don't know. I mean, all I can say is I read where she was not black, that she put out, and I'll say that. And then I read that she was black, and that's okay. Either one was okay with me. That's up to her. That's up to her.
I mean, honestly, I think it's a tragedy that we have someone who wants to be president who has consistently, over the course of his career, attempted to use race to divide the American people.
Less than 2 months until the election, Trump still refusing to concede he lost the last one.
You have said, quote, you lost by a whisker, that you, quote, didn't quite make it, that you came up a little bit short.
I said that?
Are you now acknowledging that you lost in 2020?
No, I don't acknowledge that at all.
But
I
you
said
did
that
say
sarcastically. You know that. It was said, oh, we lost by a whisker. That was said sarcastically. Look, there's so much proof. All you have to do is look at it, and they should have sent it back to the legislatures for approval.
The reality, there is no evidence of widespread voter fraud, and President Biden won the 2020 contest. Harris using the moment to call Trump unqualified.
Donald Trump was fired by 81 million people. So let's be clear about that, and clearly he is having a very difficult time processing that. But we cannot afford to have a president of the United States who attempts, as he did in the past, to upend the will of the voters in a free and fair election. And when you then talk in this way in a presidential debate and deny what over and over again are court cases you have lost because you did in fact lose that election, it leads one to believe that perhaps we do not have in the candidate to my right the temperament or the ability to not be confused about fact. That's deeply troubling, and the American people deserve better.
In their closing statements, Harris vowing to help take the country forward.
I intend to be a president for all Americans and focus on what we can do over the next 10 and 20 years to build back up our country by investing right now in you, the American people.
While Trump finally honed in on his message, questioning why Harris hasn't accomplished her plans during her time as vice president.
They've had 3.5 years to create jobs and all the things we talked about. Why hasn't she done it?
Now, the Harris team this morning is thrilled with her performance, so much so that they are already challenging Trump to another debate. But it remains to be seen if what we saw last night is going to be enough to move the needle. Now, one voter who was swayed by what they saw, Taylor Swift, posting to her 283 million Instagram followers that she has seen enough and done enough research to make up her mind, endorsing Kamala Harris. Robin.
All right, our thanks to you, Mary. And we're going to go to Rachel Scott now for more on what is going on behind the scenes of the Trump campaign in the wake of last night's debate. Good morning to you, Rachel.
Hey, Robin, good morning. And there were many questions about what version of Donald Trump was going to show up on that debate stage last night. And I will tell you, this is not the version of the former president that many of his close allies wanted to see. In fact, some of the people that are closest to the former president, including Republican Senator Lindsey Graham, called this a missed opportunity for Trump to really lay it all out there, draw that contrast with Harris on the issues that he has an edge on, the economy, immigration. They wanted to hear what he said in that closing statement a lot earlier in the debate. Heading into this debate, we knew that Harris was going to try and get under Donald Trump's skin, and she definitely did. His volume only getting louder and louder as the debate progressed. And then the former president made that unexpected surprise appearance inside the spin room. Traditionally something we don't see from candidates unless they feel like they didn't really get their message across on that debate stage. And he was asked directly about that challenge from Harris for a second debate, and he would not commit. He was asked just a few moments ago in an interview about that challenge from Harris for a second debate, and he would not commit again. It's perhaps the most telling sign of how the former president really maybe felt about how he did on that debate stage last night. Remember when President Biden was in this race, he said that he would debate him anytime, anywhere, any place, and now he's hedging, Michael.
Yeah, it looked like everything has changed for him, Rachel. Thank you so much for that. And our political director and Washington Bureau Chief Rick Klein is tracking the polling in this neck-and-neck race. Rick, the candidates, they tried to play to their strengths last night.
Yeah, good morning, Michael. We talked going into the debate about how much more Harris had to do to define herself, and you saw both candidates trying to let voters know about where they stood on some of the issues that voters are already predisposed to think they're pretty strong. The big example of the night, as we discussed, Trump kept going back to immigration and the southern border, and here's a big reason why. It is one of the strongest issues he has. He is seen as more trustworthy among voters by a 9-point margin. 45% of Americans trust him more than Kamala Harris on the issue of the border, so that's why he went to it over and over again. On the other side, you saw Harris with some of her stronger moments talking about abortion rights in very emotional and visceral terms, and this is an indication why, of all the issues that we've polled on with ABC News and Ipsos, we see a much stronger edge for Harris over Trump on this more than anything else. 47%, almost half the country, say she's more trustworthy on abortion rights. That plays directly into the gender gap. We've also talked a lot about this so far in this campaign. It is a big one. Women are 13 points more likely to be supporting Kamala Harris than Donald Trump. So again, this is playing to her strength. Right now, this debate sets up this next 2 months, and it's not just about appealing to voters who might be on the fence about who to vote for, but whether to vote at all. And that's why you saw the candidates last night playing to their strengths. George?
Okay, Rick, thanks. Let's bring in our Chief Washington correspondent, John Carl, our Chief Global Affairs anchor, Martha Raddatz. Welcome to you both. John, let me begin with you. I think one way to think about what was going on last night is that Kamala Harris was engaged in a kind of psychological warfare.
Yeah, and it began right from the moment the debate started, even before it started, when they walked onto the stage and Kamala Harris walked over to Donald Trump, going to his side of the stage for a handshake that Donald Trump did not expect and seemed like he didn't want. He started out the debate relatively calm, at least for a couple of minutes, but as the debate wore on, he became increasingly rattled and angry, yelling a lot of his answers as Kamala Harris tried to provoke him, tried to get inside his head, hitting some key touch points, ridiculing his crowd size, talking about how he is saying he is mocked by people around the world, talking about the long litany of former senior Trump officials, people that Donald Trump hired who now say that he is unfit for office. And Trump clearly was upset. He took the bait over and over again, was unable to really take the argument to Kamala Harris. Now, this morning, George, Donald Trump is saying this is his best debate ever, his greatest debate ever. But there are several indications that not even Donald Trump thinks that is remotely true. The first was the way he walked out before all those reporters in the spin room last night. And this morning, he actually refused to even commit to a debate on Fox News. He doesn't seem to want to get on the stage again with Kamala Harris.
Okay, and Martha, there was a fair amount of attention on foreign policy last night, trade with China, the Gaza war, the war in Ukraine. Harris's mantra, Donald Trump has been weak and wrong.
Exactly, and Donald Trump fired back, of course, saying that the war in Ukraine would not have happened. Vladimir Putin would not have gone in if he were president. He says the same thing about Israel, offered absolutely no evidence. And in fact, at one point, David Muir saying directly to him, do you want Ukraine to win this war? Seems like a pretty simple question, George, but he never answered that question. He also claimed that millions had died, that fake numbers were coming out of Ukraine. Kamala Harris basically just looked at him and smiled. She was asked directly, of course, about Afghanistan and whether she takes any responsibility for that disastrous pullout. She did not answer that directly. She threw that back at Donald Trump and talked about the fact that he was the one who wanted to pull out of Afghanistan and had a specific date to do that, George.
Martha Raddatz, John Carl, thanks very much. In our next half hour, we're going to talk to Donna Brazile and Chris Christie.